The Horror of Haddonfield. As Ms. Davis stepped into her new classroom, not a single student paid her any attention. She set her purse down on the desk in front and looked around. All the high school students were either on their cell phones or talking to one another. Not even one had so much as glanced in her direction, but it wasn't any different from what she expected. She clears her throat and looks around. You'd think they would show their new teacher at least a little bit of respect, she thought to herself while pulling the class roll from a yellow envelope. She begins speaking to the class. With the roll in one hand and a pen in the other, she cleared her throat and waited for the students to shift their attention to her. Most of the class turned in her direction, but a few remained occupied with their own tasks. Deciding not to put up with this, she slammed her fist down and caused a loud bang to echo throughout the room. The remaining students jolted their heads up in shock and stared at the woman in the front of the classroom. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, I'm still not used to driving around here yet. Now that I seem to have everyone's attention, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Ms. Davis, and I will be your replacement English teacher for the remainder of the year. She looked around the room as she spoke and noticed a few students had already gone back to looking at their phones. I just moved from Haddonfield, Illinois, so I'm still trying to get used to the weather here in Florida. Luckily, I seem to have... Ms. Davis stopped mid-sentence as a student's hand shot up into the air and immediately caught her attention. You have a question? She noticed that whatever she had said that piqued his interest had caused his face to light up with an almost unnerving excitement. You said you came from Haddonfield? That's exactly what I said. With this, a majority of the class started whispering and glancing to each other with wide eyes. Ms. Davis cleared her throat and the room went silent once more. I take it some of you are familiar with what happened? A few students nodded and the boy raised his hand again. Were you there? This caused the boys in the class to break out into contagious laughter, while the girls glared at him. Everyone, please quiet down. To answer your question, John? He said in a slightly hushed tone. To answer your question, John, I wasn't there that night. I don't know what my outward appearance says, but I'm a little far off from being born before the Haddonfield incident. John shrank back in his seat with embarrassment while the other boys attempted to keep their laughter under control. However, my mother was. This caused more chatter among the class, which quickly died down as Ms. Davis began to glare around the room. What did she see? A girl asked with an obvious amount of excitement in her voice. I'm sorry, but I don't feel that's an appropriate discussion to be having. A cacophony of groans echoed throughout the room before the last word even left her mouth. I'm sorry, I really am, but this is hardly something I should be discussing with students. Now, if you want to know more about this, there are plenty of videos and news articles online. With that, she turned towards the chalkboard and opened a textbook. As she began writing the chapter title in flowing cursive, she heard a student mutter something under his breath. She's full of shit, probably playing it up for attention anyway. In the middle of writing out a word, she stopped. The sound of students writing in their notebooks ceased, and the room became deathly quiet. Excuse me? Ms. Davis turned her head sharply and glared in the direction she had heard the boy speak from. For God's sake! If you're going to speak about someone behind their back, at least have the common decency to admit it when you're confronted. She stood in front of the projector and turned it on. Like I was saying, I'm going to clear some things up about the aftermath in Haddonfield. First, we need to discuss what happened. The classroom tensed up. On Halloween night in 1978, 3 teenagers were brutally murdered on the street where my mother grew up. She considers it a blessing every day that her home wasn't the one targeted. Unfortunately, the people living a couple of doors down weren't so lucky. Their daughter and her boyfriend were found in their house. There was one other victim found strangled in her car. After those 3 were killed, another person almost perished that night. Her name is Laurie Strode, and she's the only one to survive an attack by this man, Michael Myers. She scrolled back to the image of an unmasked Michael Myers and zoomed in on his eyes until they filled the screen. When the Haddonfield sheriff was interviewed about that night, he talked about his discussions with the psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis. According to him, Dr. Loomis had stated that in all the years he had observed Michael, he was never really looking at him. Instead, Michael was looking past everything, looking at that night in 1978. Ms. Davis glanced back at the screen. Even after all these years, the sight of his gaze managed to fill her with an unsettling sense of dread. My mother has told me numerous times over the years what she saw in his eyes that night on the television. At that moment, Michael wasn't looking into the camera. He was looking past that, and what he saw was another night. the night he would return to Haddonfield. A single tear escaped her eye and rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it with the back of her sleeve before turning to the class. In some ways, though, it's almost as if he never left. Please subscribe for more scary stories. I post YouTube shorts more, but you must start posting longer YouTube videos plus shorts too.